All right, welcome back. Welcome back to Pivot Seekers Online with Nikki Cates. This is another blog recap. On Monday, we released the blog entitled Can I Talk to the Manager? A Lesson on Life Management. As you can imagine, if it's coming from me, then most likely that means that the manager I'm talking about is actually you. And you are absolutely correct. We are talking about life and self management this week and probably next week as well. I'm also going to be talking about intentionality a little bit more. We talked about that last week because you cannot manage without being intentional about it. It's just no way. You won't get very far. So, yeah, stay tuned and let's get to it. All right, so just getting started here. As you can see, these are the key nuggets. We have quite a few. It's actually not as much as it looks like. It's just because some of them are really long because I want to make sure that you get the gist of it. Obviously, we'll go deeper in later lessons or later opportunities to talk about these things. But I did want to make sure that I pinpointed the most important aspects of this. I mentioned in the blog explaining my history as an administrator and a manager, one that has to organize and multitask and manage lots of people and processes and systems and situations and resources. I've had to do that in my personal life and my professional life. So I'm pretty skilled at that at this point. However, what I realize is that the greatest and most difficult lessons have been with the management of myself. And that's facts. Big facts. And you may feel the same way. I do believe that this is a common experience for most people, especially women, I would say. Nope, I take that back because I know some men as well that need help understanding this area more because we tend to think that we can just manage all of the external things and that will cause the results in our lives that we really want. But the truth is, y'all, if you don't manage here first, all those external things will still be chaotic. So you definitely want to create, um, I don't want to say a center, but you know what I mean? You want to create a foundation for the management of everything else by first finding a way to manage yourself. And what we're talking about here is I don't want to jump ahead of myself. So let's start with the most beneficial and difficult lessons to learn in life involve the management of ourselves. Like I just said, if we want to accomplish anything worthwhile, then we need to manage our fears and our emotions. I talked about this previously in previous videos and blog posts. Fear and emotions are always going to be present. They're not going anywhere. Period. As long as you're breathing, they will pop up from time to time. Nobody is fear free. I take that back. I don't know everybody in this world of billions of people. I will say most of us are not fearless. We may be able to push past our feelings in order to function in a way that appears fearless, but the emotions are always going to pop up, like anger. So the question is, do we allow that to drive the car? Do we allow that to lead our path or guide our way? Is that our guiding light, our fear and our emotions? And I did write about this previously, how I had to learn and be shown in my own life that when I thought I was standing on faith and moving by faith and not by sight, or I thought that I was moving by my integrity and my sense of purpose, I was really being driven underlying by fear. And that's quite a jarring thing to realize that, even though I was doing all the things that were right, in reality, I was still being driven by my fear of what other people would think, fear of rejection, fear of failure, that I'm just not going to be able to get to the next point like I think I am. Okay. Uh, Management of our words and actions. Man, and when I say words, I'm not just talking about words that are coming off of your tongue, which are very, very powerful, right? But it's also the power of the words that we frame in our minds. Dr. Cindy Trim teaches this lesson on this about how our minds actually create imagery. And the imagery is what we turn into expressing it through words, which is true. When you replay things in your head, you don't necessarily replay it like a script. You replay it based off of the imagery that you saw, like a video playing in your head or an images popping in your mind. And the management of our words and our actions actually create a different path for us. And if we don't manage properly, which I can think of so many times that I mismanaged just based off of this alone, not even talking about anything else, just this area of words and actions, thoughts, and how to process what I was seeing in my head and bringing it out. So think about that. That is definitely something to think about and something that we will dig deeper into. But you definitely want to consider that aspect of it. One of the most important lessons that I learned probably, I started this journey maybe about 12 years ago. And I want to say one of the most important lessons that God taught me early on was that I can choose my thoughts. I don't have to succumb to every thought that goes through my mind. I have a choice, and so do you. You have a choice if you want to allow those thoughts to continue or if you want to cut them off and move on. So, yes, absolutely. And I will tell you that changing that battle and waging in our minds to more in your favor is very difficult, but it's definitely achievable. So keep that in mind as we're moving forward. Management of our priorities and our habits. Here we're talking about self disciplines, we're talking about self hacking, we're talking about boundaries, our relationships. I'm learning that management of ourselves is super important when you're in the midst of a toxic relationship in particular. We like to blame the other person who we deem as the one that is toxic, but we all have our toxic tendencies. And the truth is that if we would begin to respond, react, and predetermine our actions and our words differently, the toxicness of the relationship will either be removed or it will shift. And I'm learning that a very difficult lesson in my own life. That's something I'm still working on myself. Our vision, managing our vision for the future. What is out in front of you that you're walking towards? Because if there's nothing, where are you going? And if you ain't going nowhere, then that means that you have nothing to look forward to. And I've been there before, and that's probably when I was in those lowest states. So I'm encouraging you to make an effort and to be more intentional about having a vision for your future. For my fellow believers, our surrender to God's most excellent vision for his kingdom through our lives. If you're a believer, you understand what I'm saying to you right now. We have to be submitted to what that looks like through God's eyes, because if we do it his way, he knows everything. He's everywhere. He knows our end. He knew our beginning. And that's every person that we come in contact with. So his vision is excellent. And his vision is what we should be aspiring to. But we can't do that in our own striving. We have to do that through surrender to him. So keep that in mind as well. That's also a form of management that needs to take place, because you got to manage your emotions and your thoughts about this. You have to manage your life and your relationships. You have to manage your time and your energy. So keep that in mind, my fellow Christian believers. Being intentional about knowing yourself doesn't happen naturally. That's not going to just happen. You have to be, we're going back to that I word, intentional about it. You have to, because if you're not, then you're not aware of what needs to be done for that day. You know, what needs to be managed, what doesn't, what's a priority, what isn't. All of these things make a difference between you actually moving forward or you being stuck in place, twirling in circles, right? How many of us have felt that way? Like either you're stuck on the side of the road in a ditch or you're twirling in circles constantly over and over and getting nowhere. So it doesn't happen naturally. You have to be intentional and you have to put effort towards it. All right. All right. Managing most of those areas I just listed above previously starts with your mindset. I've been doing some research on personalities affecting your mindset and other aspects of our mindset, because self awareness also requires being aware of the mindset that we're functioning from. And you have two different types of mindsets: you have a growth mindset and you have a fixed mindset. And there is nothing more jarring and frustrating than trying to move forward as with a growth mindset with someone with a fixed mindset. If you're familiar with the Bible and with the teachings that we learn as Christian believers, then you've heard the scripture of Jesus referring to us being unequally yoked, right? You're talking about two people trying to walk at different speeds with different forms and levels of obedience and surrender to God. Okay, so we're looking at that in life as well. We're talking about people who have a fixed mindset and people who have a growth mindset. It's two totally different situations. And it's funny because I was reading earlier, and it was saying that certain personalities naturally have a tendency towards either a fixed or a growth mindset. And I can see that because myself personally, I think I have a resistance. I don't want to say an inability because that's kind of shutting it, closing it off. I would say a resistance to change. Naturally, that is my nature. And when I took the DISC personality assessment, it definitely said that. However, I have learned through life, personally and professionally, that you can't get very far. So I've learned how to push myself into making those changes and creating that open mindset, because that fixed mindset will have you feeling like a victim all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. So you definitely want to be mindful of that. Um, a mindset change begins with dun, 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 self-awareness. I talk about this so much because obviously I'm a self-awareness coach, and I just know how important it is. We try to fix so many things in our lives without actually looking at ourselves. You're fixing everything around everywhere but here. And this here is the most important outside of your love for God and your surrender to his will, and being able to walk with others through life. Okay. The Bible says that we are to love God with all of our mind, body, and soul, all of us, right? And the second commandment, the most important one was that one, but the second one is that we love others as we love ourselves. And a lot of people focus on the loving others and they leave off the loving ourselves. But how can you truly love someone else when you don't know or love yourself? It's very difficult and it's very draining, and it will keep you in a place of misery for a long time until you actually address that. So I don't recommend that. I would say that's a 0 out of 10 type of living. So let's not focus on that anymore. And let's consider the fact that beginning to know yourself, who you are, how you are, why you are, where you're going, where you want to go, what you want, all of those things come from self-awareness. Okay? Ask yourself the thought-provoking questions that require you to look deep. You have the answer. On the blog post, the questions that I ended with are these. Do you see aspects of yourself and your life that have been mismanaged? Pausing for effect. And I'm giving you a second to think about it, but you really should think about it. If you are one who journals, I would say write that down and write it out. Not for criticism. Give yourself grace. Don't beat yourself up once you see the answers. And then figure out how you can become a better manager in those areas. It could be your health, it could be your diet, it could be your consumption, like alcohol or whatever. It could be your relationships. You might be one who isolates. And I had to learn the hard way that you cannot move forward in isolation. God did not create us to be islands, individual by ourselves. We need people. And now that I've allowed people to come into my life, it has created a village for me. We are not built to be one people villages, y'all. And the second question, are you willing to acquire the skills to manage yourself just as intentionally as you manage the external factors of life? We're not talking about let me just do this so I can get this result. We are talking about doing the work so that we have long-term results and we're not continually circling back around to start over again. I told y'all before, listen to your girl because I've done it. Starting over means going backwards. All right. So if you practice long-term patience and do it the right way the first time, or the millionth time, the thousandth or hundredth time, at least you know that this time around you're going to actually see the results that you seek, and they're going to be long term, not short term. All right. So, finally, your personal mismanagement will always affect your professional development and success. So, you want to take a holistic approach. Many of us go get degrees and certifications and all these things that we're thinking it's going to do to help us make that money and move forward in life, gain titles and status. But let me tell you something. Even if you were to acquire all of that without doing the inner work, eventually that inner work is going to come creeping in and remind you that you have not. And I'm telling you, when you don't, that's where misery settles in. That's where dysfunction settles in. That's where you're opening yourself up to all of those things, all of that chaos, because you didn't start from within. So while you're doing all of those things externally, I encourage you to take a more holistic approach to it. Understand why you're doing things. When we don't sit and we think about who we are and do the research and take the time to get to know ourselves and who we are and what we want and who God is and what He wants. If we haven't done that, then most likely we're doing what everyone else wants. That's just facts because you don't know. So when you take a holistic approach, you're starting from within and then you're going to exuberate all of that outward. Okay? I hope that makes sense. I hope that helps at least a little bit. And I will see you next week. All right. Bye.